The coverage of chess on the internet in 2013, I would say, is spectacularly good. There's hardly a major tournament which isn't covered in some excellent way by various commentators, by various sites, and we at the BCM try to keep up with this trend. Accordingly, my game of the month for July 2013 is the game between Magnus Carlsen playing white and Carlsen-Anand playing black. And this game was played in the Tal Memorial in Moscow, June 2013. And of course this game has particular significance because later on this year these two are going to duel for the World Championship match. Anand will wish for a better performance than the one he puts up in this game. Well, you never quite know what Carlsen's going to play. On this occasion he decides to open with d4 and c4. And Anand delicately steers the game away from the semi-Slav defence, or Meron defence, which he's been using quite a lot, and especially at the highest level. We can expect to see that, I think, in the World Championship match, and also to see some serious preparation from Carlsen against it. But in this game, Anand goes back to basics more or less. He sticks with the very solid Nimzo Indian defence, and perhaps this opening too will also be given an outing in the forthcoming match. As I say, you never quite know what Carlsen's going to come up with in the opening, and here he plays the Rubinstein variation, avoiding 4 Queen C2. Black castles, that is the trend these days. Of course, black can also play C5, he can play D5, he can play Knight C6, he can play B6. There are many alternatives at this point. Castles is what they mainly do these days. And now white has to choose. Bishop D3, could he play A3? He plays Knight G to E2. And the usual idea behind that is that more or less whatever black does, white's going to play A3. Then if black wants to take on C3, white will recapture with the knight and have 2 nice bishops. So naturally Anand avoids this by moving his bishop back to E7. I remember this is a very classical line. Among the great players, it was Sami Reshevsky who used to use this line a lot for white. But there were many great players who came this way. This is a very old-fashioned Nimzo line. C takes D5 was answered by knight takes D5. Now clearly black can take back with the pawn here. That is a reliable alternative. And then white can choose between G3, maybe knight F4. There's also B4 here, trying to cramp black. So I presume, going back to our featured game, that knight takes D5 is an attempt to just maybe exchange off a pair of minor pieces and ease black's slight lack of space. So white plays a very modest move here, bishop D2. Absolutely typical of the system in question. White's main idea is essentially here to try to play E4 at the right moment, to expand in the centre and to obtain an advantage as a result. Black just continues with development, and white does the same. Pawn up to G3. Carlsen obviously feels it's propitious to delay E4 for the time being, preferring just to develop his pieces naturally and get castled. So Anand counters on the long diagonal. Before black gets the chance to play bishop B7, white takes on D5. Quite good timing, fixing a black pawn on D5. And now bishop G2 was answered by bishop B7. And now comes the first new move of the game. Now by far the most commonly played move in this position is castles. I mean, that's pretty natural. And then black chooses between 2 natural moves here, either rook E8 or knight F6. There's not a great deal to choose between them. For instance, after knight F6, white may play queen C2, and then black prepares the move C5. There was an old correspondence game played in 2005 between S. Semenov and B. Jacobs, where white played bishop B4 here, in very similar vein to the featured game, and now black was able to counter with C5, with a decent position. In our featured game, very interestingly, Carlsen plays the new move here, bishop B4, and that is very interesting. If black wants to play C5, then his D5 pawn becomes very, very weak. And if he doesn't, let's say he takes on B4, white recaptures, And now black is quite cramped on the queen side. That pawn on b4 is a strength rather than a weakness. And black is rather cramped in this position. For instance, white, it might already be threatening b5 here, pawn up to b5, and that really cramps black to quite an extent. So perhaps black should play c6 here, and then we carry on castles, rook e8. This might not be too bad for black, but you would think that white was a shade better after queen b3, because white's got some pressure both on the a file and on the c file. But as I say, this is a playable position for black. Perhaps Anand didn't like it because it looks quite passive. Just going back to bishop b4 then, black preferred to play knight f6. Just a nice steady move. Now white castled, and he hoped what were improved circumstances. Black played his rook to e8, and now another very natural move here, rook to c1. Again enticing black to take on b4. And once again, it's an offer which Anand refuses. Just playing the natural move here, very solid, pawn up to c6. Well, just dropping back, if black takes on b4, let's review this continuation once again. You somehow feel this should be playable for black. For instance, queen d7 to kick off with. That prevents the move b5 for the time being. And if white tries to manufacture b5, then black can put his knight in on e4. Knight f4, c6. Black has definitely a playable position here. It's all about choice. So c6 was the move played on the day. Off came the dark square bishops. And now Carlsen plays a kind of prophylactic move here, rook e1, which actually he puts to spectacular use as the game progresses. As stated, white would very much like to prepare the move e4 in favourable circumstances. So f3, maybe knight f4, e4 is part of white's plan. Rook e1, it looks as though e4 is going to take white a long time to actually play, but as you'll see in the game, he manages to effect the advance pretty quickly. The trouble with black's position is it's quite passive. That is the problem. Black can't really do very much. He's got to almost wait for white to play e4. So Anand plays queen to d6, a very coherent move, knight to f4, and now black plays bishop back to c8. Another passive looking move, but what's this bishop doing on b7? I must admit another attractive alternative here seems to be rook a8. I suppose against that white could just drop back with knight d3 and maintains a slight edge. There's some pressure there on black's position. Another possibility here is queen c2. Maybe that's the reason Anand plays bishop c8 straight away, because queen c2 of course prevents that move due to the threat to c6. So bishop c8 was played, trying to get this bishop back into the game. White's queen comes out to a4, hitting the pawn on c6, which black defends. Again a slight concession, and now white goes through with his plan, prepared with rook e1, f3, and then brings his bishop out to e6, and now e4. What I like about this game is the simplicity with which Carlsen first of all develops all his pieces and then goes through with this very dangerous plan. And any player of the Nimzo will tell you now that actually black could be getting the worst of things in this position. Black's problem is white has a pawn majority in the centre. White's going to push forward with either e5, which of course is the immediate threat, or d5 according to circumstances, should black take on e4, and could get a very vicious attack as a result. And captured, maybe reluctantly. He could try queen d7 here, but then we go forward with e5, and now a good move here is rook to c3. Just cramping black on the c file, continuing to build up. That rook could easily swing along the third rank as the game progresses. As long as black can't play c5 here, then white is clearly better. So Anand took, maybe hoping to get some counterplay against d4. White recaptured, of course. And now queen to d7. b5 was suggested by Houdini when I ran this game through the engine. And then queen b4 by white, queen d7. But now knight takes e6 seems to be better for white. I don't see a comfortable recapture for black. If he takes with the queen, we can go d5. And if queen e5, d6, rook d7, rook takes c6, this looks winning for white. And going back to knight takes e6, if f takes e6, now e5 is a very good move. And then perhaps the slightly surprising move, queen d6. Excellent, as white is putting serious pressure on black's pawn structure. And if black takes and retreats, we go bishop h3 with a mop-up job in prospect. So queen d7 was played in the game. White pushes forward with a very well-timed move, d5. Black's reluctant to open the long diagonal, but doesn't really have much choice here. Allowing white to exchange queens, and now Carlsen effects a nice forcing sequence after knight takes e6, f takes e6, and now bishop h3. Putting black under really, really intolerable pressure almost. Well, what can black play? If he plays rook e8, we go e takes d5. And if a retreat, then bishop takes e6 check is good. Black simply doesn't have enough compensation for the pawn in this position, and white can build up with a move like rook e5. The problem for black is his back rank, of course. And this allows white to play rook c7 in this position. So that if rook takes d5, we take, he can take on e2, and then we go bishop c4. With winning pressure, as white is going to win at least a pawn in this position. So bishop h3 was answered by king h8. Carlsen presses forward relentlessly with e5. Knight comes to g8. Bishop takes e6. By now, of course, Anand must have realised that the game was up. White brings his rook in to a beautiful square, d4, and now the block, bishop d7, finishes the game. The e-pawn will inexorably advance, so it's not too early to resign. Well, Anand will hope that we don't see too many games like that in the forthcoming World Championship match. And this was, in fact, a surprisingly one-sided game. Congratulations to Magnus Carlsen on this splendid victory. Anand will have to think very hard about the way he's going to counter 1d4 in the forthcoming match.